Welcome back, everybody. This is Magic of Randy. I am Randy, and today we're going to talk about the modern metagame and the RCs that just happened last weekend. We had the European one, we had Canada's RC, and Brazil's RC. And I'm going to go over kind of all the information we have from them, kind of break down what happened, what this means moving forward with the other RCs we still have going on, like the two in the US here coming up in February and March. As always, guys, though, if you like what you're seeing, you like what I'm doing, go ahead and leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, it really helps me out, and ring the notification bell. So let's get into it here. We had European RC, we had the Canadian RC, and the Brazil RC. So I got the breakdowns from what we had from day 1 to day 2. So European had 996 players altogether, with 131 coming back for day 2. Canada only had 430 players on day 1, with 98 coming back for day 2. And Brazil had only 189. I couldn't find a lot of information about the Brazil RC, so I do apologize if anybody was hoping to get a lot of information about that. I'm not sure what happened with that. I'm not sure if they don't do a lot of things with Magic or what was going on down there. So apologize now for it. But we did have the first place in Europe going to Temur Breach. We had first place in Canada going to Boros Energy, and we had first place in Brazil going to Temur Eldrazi. So not any one clear deck just taking out all three. Kind of good to see. The metagames felt kind of healthy as a whole. At least for the European and the Canadian RC. I can't speak too much about the Brazil. I didn't watch any of it for sure, and I didn't really see any kind of coverage or anything about it. So again, I apologize for that information. But the European RC was the one I focused mainly on. It had really good coverage, had a lot going on with it, and it seemed like a more competitive field than the Canada RC, just in my personal opinion. That being said, though, both the Canada and the European RC looked very good as a whole. Looked like a healthy metagame. Now, obviously, there's a lot more. We're seeing, still a lot of energy, still a lot of, Eldrazi, things like that. So it's not like it's a super wide open meta, but it's not a super wide open meta, if that makes any sense to anybody. Really, the biggest problem I see kind of going forward, or what's going on, is that Breach still looks like it's the quote best deck in the format. That being said, it wasn't like it took over the format by any means. It didn't, just soul crush everybody. It didn't just take down tournaments left and right. It wasn't, 15 of the top 16 decks or anything crazy like that. Boros Energy is still, unfortunately, here. It looks like it was like the most played deck out of both the European and the Canadian RC. Not too surprising. The deck didn't really lose a whole bunch. I mean, it lost the ring, but so did everybody else. And it lost its 2-drop that wasn't, the linchpin of the deck. So definitely probably something that should have been hit a little bit harder from Wizards, but we'll see how that all shakes out. All right, so I have Canadian, or keep on saying Canadian, Canada's RC. I have their day 2 meta. This is the conversion of what happened, or what kind of went on with the day 1, day 2. There's nothing too fancy. This was done by someone else who was helping with the tournament. Really appreciate them putting together any of this kind of information. But it looks like, Energy on day 1 did have 80, which was the most played, with 22 converting into day 2. Same thing with Oculus, is a huge number with 68 and 16 converting. Grinding Breach with 42 with 10 converting. Eldrazi Ramp basically the same with 41 and 10 converting. And then Amulet still having 21 players, 7 converting. The Orzhov Blink, Orzhov Death and Taxes, Orzhov whatever you want to call it, essentially, because names don't mean anything, had 20 with 7 converting, and then Belcher had 19 with 4 converting. So, as we can see here, it looks like, Orzhov Blink had the best conversion rate as a whole, with its conversion rate being 35%. Looks like that deck is here to stay. I know a lot of people were wondering, is this a flash in the pan? Is it going to stick around? I would say after these couple RCs, it looks like it is a real deck moving forward. I've even put up, it was, it got second place here in the Canada RC. So it looks like, it is a real viable deck. Whether or not, people will start playing some hate pieces for it or try to stop it out, we'll just have to wait and see. Be interesting, moving forward, seeing how that happens. Energy, still doing energy things. Most played deck, had still a solid conversion rate of 27%. Still, just doing what it does, right? It, turn one guide into turn 2, Ajani is still a good way to play. Shocking no one. The Oculus deck still did well in Canada. It was did not do that well in the European RC, but we'll get to that here in a second. Grinding Breach, I'm almost a little surprised that only 42 players took it. I think, everyone kind of thought that was the best deck in the format going forward. It could be people are hesitant to buy the Mox Opals. I'm not sure what the lack of, or why, maybe people don't want to spend $700 on Mox Opals. Who knows? Eldrazi Ramp definitely kind of showcased out this weekend. It's a deck that I kind of took for granted. I kind of thought it was maybe a little gimmicky, maybe a little not all the way put there, maybe not whatever, but it definitely kind of surprised me this weekend with how well it did in both Canada and the European RCs. So definitely think that's more here to say. Amulet of the Titan, still a good deck. Nothing changed. As long as Modern's around, Amulet of the Titan is going to be in the meta. It's still going to be a good deck to play. Learn how to play it. You'll have a deck for life. And Belcher, having a decent conversion rate, still only like 21%, but nice to see, Belcher is putting up these numbers. And I think it's a good deck to play if, we're going to keep seeing all these energy decks, because Belcher does have a good game 1 against energy. You just have to win one of your game 2 or 3s, theoretically. All right, moving on to the meta breakdown for the European RC. So this is a day 1 breakdown. So not too surprising, we had the most played deck was Boros Energy with 25% of the field. Kind of crazy it was so high. When you look at the next most played deck is the Oculus deck at 11.4%. So literally almost double the next deck, or sorry, over double the next deck for Boros Energy. I think one of the biggest takeaways we can take away from the RCs here is that Boros Energy is probably going to be the most played deck at both the US's RCs. I don't see that changing anytime soon. The deck still had put up great numbers. It wasn't like it just 250 people registered it and 5 people made it to day 2. That was not the case. Dimir Oculus, again, I don't think anyone's surprised by having 11% meta share. I said, I think either on the podcast or in the video last week, where I thought Dimir Oculus would be about 10% of the meta going into these RCs, and 11.4 is pretty accurate. Grinding Breach, kind of where I thought it would be at 2, well, 11% meta. I thought that it might be not as high as Boros Energy because there is some skill gaps with that. It is a little bit of a harder deck to play as a whole, especially if someone gets rid of your grinding station or your Underworld Breach. Makes it a little bit more difficult to try to win those games. And it's also a very expensive deck in comparison to the other decks and cards you're going to play in another deck, essentially, or cards you're going to switch around. Eldrazi Ramp at 9% or 9.5%. Kind of a little surprising with that high. I didn't think Eldrazi Ramp was going to be doing that popular. I know when I played it, it kind of felt a little lackluster. I've seen some new improvements with the deck. I do think it's gotten a little bit better. People kind of tightened up that 60 and 75 list altogether. And then we had a huge drop off. We had Golgari, Yawgmoth, or just Yawgmoth. I don't know really why it's called Golgari Yawgmoth. At 3.5%, only 35 players registered that. Orzhov Blink with 3.5%, kind of where I thought it would be. I thought Orzhov would be at sub 5%. Just because it's still really new, people aren't completely sold on that deck yet. Obviously, it had a good showing this weekend with the different RCs, so maybe some more people are going to pick that up for the US RCs. Maybe switch it around. Belcher with 34 copies, basically 3.5%. Not too surprising. I think Belcher's a good deck, but I also think it's one of those decks where it doesn't necessarily struggle against open lists because you don't really gain too much. Most decks don't have a game plan for Belcher in game 1 either anyway. Boros Energy is just going to mulligan into a more aggressive hand. That can be your big thing, or Oculus is going to try to mulligan into more counter spells or whatever they're playing in that game, because they're not always playing counterspell. They're going to try to do that, or Breach is going to try to mulligan into a more aggressive win as fast as it can. But Belcher still has counterspells, things like that, so I don't think it really loses too much like most combo decks do. Same thing with how Grinding Breach doesn't really lose anything in an open deck list. It still is super resilient. Same thing with Amulet of the Titan. It doesn't really another combo deck that doesn't really lose to an open deck list, because what are you going to mulligan to really beat it? Amulet of the Titan with 28 copies, 2.5%, almost 3% there. Ruby Storm with 27 copies, Mardu Energy with 2% of the meta. I think Boros Energy is probably just better. I don't think you gain anything with the black. The main Zoo with only 19 copies. Deck that kind of fell off the face of the earth, honestly. I think it's still not terribly positioned. It's not something I would necessarily register for sure, but it is interesting that, at least it was enough of a percentage to be almost 2% of the metagame. Kind of surprising in my opinion. That being said, this metagame kind of looks like what I would have expected going into this tournament, where Boros and Dimir Oculus being, one of the top two, or Boros being the top I expected, and then Dimir Grinding Breach or Breach being, number 2 or number 3, Eldrazi Ramp being in the top 4, not surprising. Yawgmoth Yawgmoth and Orzhov being, at tied for 5 or 5th place essentially is kind of surprising. I didn't see that coming. I didn't think Yawgmoth would be that popular, so that was kind of interesting. But outside of that, nothing really too surprising. Domain Zoo being almost 2% was a little surprising. Moving on to day 2, though. So we went from so we got Boros Boros Energy still having a 52% win rate in day 1, showcasing why it is played as it is. Grinding Breach moved up to number 2 with a 56% win rate, 21 copies into day 2. Eldrazi Ramp moved up to number 3, 56 or 55% win rate, 21 copies. Orzhov Link had 8 copies with 53% win rate. Tameshi moving up with 7 copies, 51%. Domain Zoo had 19 people register, and 5 of them made it into day 2. Kind of crazy that Domain did so well. Had a 58% win rate. That is the best win rate percentage out of all these decks, which is kind of wild because Domain Zoo, like I said, is kind of like fell off the face of the earth. So a little crazy to see Domain Zoo doing so well. And then we have Dimir Oculus. Just let's go back real quick. Dimir Oculus had 114 players register. Okay, no, that's a good number of people to register the deck. Clearly, some people would have made it in. 5 people made it into day 2. That is horrendous and crazy that we look at that and we see, just the 4% conversion rate. For a deck that's been touted as kind of the second best deck in the format, or not second most played deck in the format. Let me phrase that. It wasn't counted as the best deck. I will retract that right away. And with a 45% win rate, I do think the biggest problems I see with Dimir is it doesn't have a necessarily... So one, right off the bat, Dimir doesn't have a good win rate against Boros Energy. And I think that is something you need to at least have a little bit higher than, a 50-50 against Boros Energy if it's going to be the most played deck in the format. You need to have a better plan against that, and Dimir Oculus just struggles against that deck. It always feels like you're fighting an uphill battle every game against Boros Energy. Against Grinding Breach, you can put kind of a fast clock on them, but they can go even faster. Eldrazi Ramp has a lot of cast triggers, which just kind of kill you game 1. Game 2, you can fight back with that because you have the Cassandra Memories. Orzhov Link is just can outvalue you. Belcher is kind of one of your better matchups. You can win that counter war type situation, but not always. So yeah, it's not too surprising to see Dimir Oculus kind of have a harsh reality, I think, moving forward. Then Golgari Yawgmoth, only put in 4 copies into day 2 with 49% win rate. Mardu Energy, 2 people made it in with 52% win rate, so not terrible considering it only started off with 19 players. And I think Boros Energy is just a better version at this point. Amulet Titan only putting in 2 copies with a 48% win rate, and Ruby Storm with 1 with a 39% win rate. So definitely some harsh realities going forward here. I think what we are finding out, Boros Energy is still very powerful, still a good deck. Grinding Breach, while definitely doing well, is not the end all be all, right? It's not just dominating the format by any means. I think Eldrazi Ramp put some respect into its name this past weekend, where people I don't think were truly that prepared for it, or truly not even prepared for it. Probably isn't the correct wording. More just I don't think people thought it was as good as like what it suggested it was doing. Um, this weekend, and it definitely put kind of put some respect to its name and showcasing that it's here to stay and it's not a bad deck. Um, Same thing with Orzhov Blink. I think Orzhov kind of put some respect that it's not a flash in the pan type deck. You need to respect me. I am going to be here in the metagame. And I think Belcher also kind of made sure people remember that like I was good against Boros Energy, but I'm also good against the rest of the field. I don't just crumble to hate. And then Domain Zoo just told everybody that you should still be afraid of little guys coming in to attack. They are coming in. They're going to get you with a 58 win percent rate on day one. Definitely something to look at. Definitely something to think about. Maybe Domain Zoo isn't a bad choice going into your RCs. Just kind of food for thought, really. Which is kind of surprising because like I feel like Boros Energy should have a good matchup against Domain Zoo, just being a little bit more resilient, not needing to worry about its colors, things like that, still having good removal against their stuff. But yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Obviously, you had a 58 win percent. Oh my gosh, 58 win rate percentage. On day one, so it clearly did something right. All right. So then this is another thing that people had kind of put together. I'll have a link to this down in the video description. If you want to take a look at it, it has all the other decks. I just kind of showcasing, the most popular decks. Essentially, we had Boros Energy, Dimir Oculus, Temur Breach, the Eldrazi Ramp, Mono Blue Belcher, Amulet Titan, Orzhov Blink, Yawgmoth, Ruby Storm, Mardu Energy, and Domain Aggro. So this is kind of like going through a lot of the RCs, and then also moving back as well to kind of showcase, what's been going on through the meta since, kind of the big shift with the bans and stuff like that. So Boros Energy, sitting firmly at, a 51% win rate as a whole, not a bad idea to take, obviously, you can have some little percentage difference there as a whole. But I think Boros Energy is kind of showcasing it as one of the best decks to play, especially into the open field. Sometimes just curving out can crush your opponent when they, stumble just for a second. Really good deck to take. There's no reason not to take it. If it's something you feel comfortable with, I would be registering that to any of your RCs or any of your RCQs. I know after the standard season, we're going to be going back into modern, so expect Boros Energy to be here and be in your face. Dimir Oculus as a whole has a 48% win rate. I think that's pretty accurate. I think this is not well positioned in the meta. I think that like these kind of control-y style decks just aren't good in the meta right now. The meta is pretty fast. You need to be you need to be reactive and putting your foot to the gas as well. And I don't think Oculus does that well, especially when like you're trying to turn to cast a frog. It's just not where you necessarily want to be at in the meta. Temur Breach, 56% win rate. Honestly, not too surprising. I think this deck is very well positioned. I think it has a lot of things going for it. I do think, though, if people start bringing a lot more graveyard hate and interaction like that, it's going to see it lose some percentage points. And I think you can make that up, against the Breach deck. I don't think it's something that, we're stuck with, like, Breach is just always going to win type situation. I think Breach is something that can be beat, and it's a very good deck. I don't know if it's worth anything getting banned out of it or anything like that. I know people already talked about, well, should we ban Breach? Does Mox Opal need to get put back on the ban list? Does Grinding Station need to get banned? And all the other things that people love to talk about. I don't think Breach is nearly as oppressive as what we've seen before. I think we need to let the meta adjust some more. I don't think it's, necessarily too broken or too crazy in any way, shape, or form. The Eldrazi Ramp deck, that being like both the green-red and Temur version as a whole, 52% win rate. I think this deck is pretty well positioned. As a whole, I think you have about a 50-50 against a lot of the decks going on, and I think against like the creature decks, you can kind of really go up and over top of them. As a whole, you can play through the traditional hate of like, either like Harbinger of the Seas or Blood Moon. Sorry, Blood Moon just hasn't even played that much recently, so I think Eldrazi Ramp is definitely not a bad place to be at in the meta, and you can kind of just do dumb stuff with it when you mana ramp out fast. It's a little ridiculous that we still have soul lands essentially in modern. Yes, they're only for Eldrazi's mostly, but they are quite powerful. Mono Blue Belcher with a 52% win rate, not too crazy. I think it has a good matchup against a lot of the decks. Notably, it does have, if you look through here, to a 25% win rate against Temur Breach. does kind of hurt the deck as a whole. I'm not sure if it's nearly as bad as what it's showcasing or what's going on with that. I don't think the matchup's that terrible, but I could very well be wrong. I haven't played a whole bunch against Team of Breach as a Belcher player. That being said, though, I think you have enough good energy or good matchups overall to where you can, easily take that to a good finish at the RCs to get onto the Pro Tour, make it into the top 8 type situation. Definitely possible. Amulet Titan with a 49% win rate overall. That could be from a lot of people trying to pick up the deck. It is a little bit more complicated and convoluted than it seems. So, picking up the deck and trying it out and then realizing that this isn't for you, or maybe you're bad at the deck, or whatever the case may be, type situation. It's not too surprising to see it have a little bit below 50% win rate. I think the deck realistically sits at like a 50 to 52% win rate when we're talking about like a experienced pilot piloting the deck. Orzhov Blink, though, with a 55% overall, kind of huge. I think it also helps that it's a new kid on the block. People weren't entirely sure how to attack it. There's a lot of like, not mid-range grind, but like between Eldrazi Ramp and Portal's Energy and Dimir Oculus, there's a lot of like these like grinding matchups, and Orzhov Blink was made to grind, right? Not too surprising to see it do so well as a whole. I do think it's a good position deck. I think if you can figure out how you're beating the Boros Energy matchup, or playing the Boros Energy matchup, you can definitely take this to the tournament and take down the tournament. I don't think that's anything crazy. Yogg with the 47%, I don't think that's too. It's not too bad of a deck, but when you sit here and you look at like Temur Breach, Eldrazi Ramp, Mono Blue, and Amulet Titan are all some 50 and some are 30 or less, or 40 or less, I think that's where you really lose the Guardiness. I still think Yawgmoth is that well positioned right now. It's a good deck, but it's not good, if that makes sense. Ruby Storm at 42%, not really too surprising. The deck is okay as a whole, but it honestly, I find that it just loses so hard to Graveyard, or not to Graveyard hate, but to the sideboard hate that people have. People have a game plan for it. Everyone's ready for it. Sure, you get a lot of like, you won on turn 2, turn 3 on in game 1, and then you lose game 2 and 3. It's just, I don't know what to say. Storm feels like it should be super powerful. It should just be winning, and somehow it doesn't. And then when you play it, you can't really quantify why you're losing, because it feels like you should have won these games and you're still just losing. And this is someone who's played Ruby Storm and wants it to be good. So nothing too crazy there. Mardu Energy having a 51%, same as Boros Energy, not too surprising. They play so many of the same cards. Not much to say about that as a whole. And then Domain Aggro at a 50% seems to be about right, honestly, with it being, the super aggressive deck that can also has the burn to do the reach. It seems well positioned, I guess, as a whole. It did well, way better than I expected it to, so nothing too crazy to write home about. So, what does this mean going forward? What does all this data mean? What does all this mean? I think what we can, really talk about, or what we can really say, is that Boros Energy is here to stay. Johnny's not going anywhere. The deck is still very well positioned, still putting up crazy numbers, and still doing super well in the tournaments. We just saw the last 3, paper events. They did well, and is doing well in the challenges. If you're looking to pick up a deck, it's definitely a safe deck to pick up. I don't see it getting hit anytime soon, unless Wizards, decides that they need to ban something out of it. I don't see that. Excuse me. I don't see that happening. I don't see Wizards banning anything out of the deck. Really, it's not oppressive. It has a good matchup against a lot of things, but it's not dominating the game. It's not. A lot of people are playing it. That's why it's doing so well. It has a syndrome of where a lot of people are playing it, so it shows up in more numbers because of that. But it's not dominating. We saw, in the challenges or in the RCs, it wasn't dominating there. It did well for sure. It's a good deck. It's something, if you want to pick something up that you're looking to play if you're looking to play the RC, or do like the last chance qualifiers, definitely Boros Energy is a good pick. It's also going to be a good pick moving on to the RCQs coming up next in the next season after Standard. Definitely still a good deck. This is, if you're looking for someone to pick up that has a relatively good win rate against a lot of decks and can do well against a lot of stuff, this is what I would pick up. Not going anywhere. The Breach Grinding Station deck, definitely not going anywhere unless it gets banned. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about wanting to ban it. I don't think it's oppressive enough to ban. Um, at least not yet. No one's broken it to where just like, oh, no matter what kind of hate I bring in, I just can't win. So I think again another deck to look at picking up that is a lot more pricier if you want to pick it up. Mox Opals are fundamentally outrageous. I do think that like they need a reprint terribly bad. I don't care what you need to do to reprint them, Wizards. Put them in a set, put them in something that I can open so that they can drive that price down. But I think Grinding Stations kind of proved itself as a deck to be here, a deck to do well with, a deck that is not going anywhere either. And you need to have a sideboard plan for it. You need to have a game plan for this deck. You can't just ignore it. Same thing like how Boros Energy is. And then I think the Eldrazi decks really kind of showcase that they're here as well. Maybe we need to learn how to play, more Blood Moons, more land hate like that. I'm not sure if that's the case. That's where you need to go with to beat the Eldrazi decks, or if Consigned to Memories are enough. I think that we're in this weird position where it has the Eldrazi deck has this kind of like early game of like just doing a little bit of mana ramping. Its mid game is good with its 4 drops and 5 drops that can kind of play, and then its late game of like 7+ drops that just affect the board state and do well are here to stay. I think that these are probably going to be 3 of the best decks moving forward, and 3 of the most played decks we're going to see at the next couple RCs. I think Boros Energy is going to continue to be on top. I think that we're going to see an uptick in the Breach Grinding Station deck. For sure, it's showcased how powerful it is, and I think Eldrazi is getting picked up a lot more, has a lot more eyes on it, so that could end up killing the deck. People start playing a lot more hate for it. We see the Boros Energy deck start, main decking Blood Moon again, maybe something like that. I'm not sure, but it is something to kind of notate and think about. But that's all I have for you guys. This is kind of what my takeaways from these large RCs and what's going on. As always, if you like what you're seeing, like what I'm doing, leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel, it really helps me out. Ring the notification bell so you know when new videos come out. And let me know what you guys are playing in your RCs, what you're playing in your RCQs. Love to hear from you, and what you think is going to happen in Modern. I'll catch you guys next time.